Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid just absolutely dominated Xabi Alonso's Real Madrid. The most impressive part is he did it in two ways: the traditional Simeone method, as well as a much more front-foot approach that we rarely see from him in the biggest matches, and was so effective it had Alonso fiddling with formations throughout the 90. So what were these tactics? Let's take a look. Usually, for the sake of discussion, the attacking shape and the defensive shape are looked at almost as separate entities, but a lot of Madrid's first half issues emphasized how these two phases are inextricably linked. In possession, Simeone was often positioned alongside Valverde, as Alonso defaulted to the back three in the build-up that he heavily favors, with Carreras tucking in to be the third centre-back, while Militao moved wider on the right-hand side. The game plan in general for Madrid in this first half was fairly clear. With the solid-looking double pivot, it was up to Jude Bellingham to push up from the midfield into a highly attacking midfield position, giving him freedom to crash into the box. Similarly to what he did in the midfield diamond in his first season at Madrid. But unlike that first season, where Bellingham was splitting Mbappe and Vinicius, Carreras being withdrawn allowed both of the wingers to be playing off of the left-hand side. And with good reason, as both do prefer to start on the left before attacking centrally. So this default position allowed them to rotate at will, and we saw a lot more of Mbappe picking up the ball at left wing than we usually do. This all sounds great in theory, but Madrid would have quickly realized that they were facing one massive problem. Because what do you see when looking at Madrid's attacking directions? It's pretty obvious, right? Barely anything came through the center of the park, which tends to have the most dangerous attacking zones. So how did Atletico achieve this? Well, while they were a 4-4-2 on paper, Simeone dropped into the backline so that he and Hanchko were effectively the wing-backs, and the 3 and 2 in front of them could remain extremely compact, with the front 2 on the pivots and the 3 protecting this space in front of the defense, so that all the Real Madrid attacks were funneled down to the flanks. But for most of the match, this wasn't actually some ultra-defensive Simeone low block. They were super aggressive without the ball. As soon as the ball predictably went out wide, as it was the only outlet, the pressure was immediately applied on the widest man. And as soon as the first pass went backwards, it was the trigger for a cascade of pressing, with the midfield and then the front line doing their best to force the ball all the way to Courtois so that they could reset their defense with a much higher line. Real were also facing another problem in the attack. The front 5 in this 3-2-5 were certainly fluid and not rigidly stuck in the 5 vertical lanes, but for the most part, it was Carvajal that was expected to provide all of the width down the right. But of course, he is not really a threat, which is why predictably most of the play for Madrid ended up down the left-hand side. And obviously, with Vinicius and Mbappe there, Madrid could look dangerous, but the dynamic did make Madrid more predictable in the attack, and that little bit easier to defend against, as Atleti could preemptively begin to shift over to their right. In the second half, we even saw Mbappe trying to drift right earlier and earlier to try and give them some attacking impetus from this flank. But there is one massive factor that we haven't talked about when thinking of Madrid's attacking shape, and that's actually their defensive shape. When in set defense like this, much like Atleti, they wanted to be in a 5-3-2, but rather than dropping a winger deep, it was Simeone who was dropping in from the midfield. It meant that when they were in possession, there were always extremely vulnerable moments when they were shifting between the back 4 and the back 5. If Simeone was pushing up when Madrid had the ball and Atleti were pressing ferociously like we initially saw, there would be a moment where the gap between the two centre-backs had grown, and if Atleti did win the ball back and they could attack quickly enough, they would have a clear route to goal. Similarly, we saw scenarios where Madrid had been on the attack, with Güler and Bellingham having pushed high, and if Madrid lost the ball in these situations, there could be huge issues. Simeone would have a choice to make, whether to counter-press or drop back into the backline. If he dropped in too early, there would now be a chasm through the middle that Atleti could easily walk through. So why did Alonso want to defend with this dynamic 3? Well, Atleti had a front 2 and would have had a man-to-man situation against a back 4, which is extremely risky because if one man is beaten, Atleti would now instantly have a 2 versus 1 advantage. So the extra man in a back 5 would at least give them some cover in these situations. At least most of the time, because even when they were defending in a 3, in more controlled defensive phases, Madrid was still struggling. With Güler expected to defend narrow, when Hansko was in possession, Carvajal could look to press early. And here was the issue. Because Simeone was often alternating between midfield and defense so often, the back 3 could get caught defending quite narrow, as the centre-backs were not sure whether they would have to be in close proximity if Simeone was high, or spread out if Simeone had dropped in. As a result, there were often huge spaces out wide that either Sorloth could run directly into, or Nico Gonzalez, who was providing the running power from the midfield, could make the move into that room instead. And these constant runs in behind from the forwards and the midfield were cornerstones of the Atleti victory. But at the same time, when Madrid sat deeper in the 5-3-2, much like Atleti, it meant that they were sacrificing space out wide. The difference is, the lack of box presence for Madrid meant that they would have to start wide and then dribble into ideal cutback positions. Atleti, on the other hand, had the towering Sorloth, so this space out wide became deadly, as they were often inviting an Atleti man to swing in across to the big man, which had deadly consequences. The fluidity of the Madrid midfield was at times turning on them, and becoming chaos instead. Alonso shifted in the second half, hoping to address multiple of these issues at once. Asensio, Camavinga, and Mastantuono on. Militao, Güler, and Carvajal off. Madrid now shifted to a permanent 4-2-3-1 that looked like this. Still, the attacking shape was a 3-2-5, but there was a difference now. The conservative fullback was the right back in Asensio, and Carreras often pushed into the left half space earlier on, meaning now Madrid would have 2 genuine wingers receiving outside that narrow Atleti block, diversifying their threat. Again, good in theory, but on this specific day, the Atleti back 5 were able to cope by making sure that the half space was well monitored, while still instantly applying pressure on the wide men. And at the same time, the new back 4 shape showed exactly why Alonso wanted the back 3 to begin with, because of that man-to-man situation. Because what do we have here? Madrid in a back 4, and Sorloth and Alvarez are man-to-man with the centre-backs. Alvarez drops deep, drawing Huijsen with him, and Sorloth's movement into the space vacated draws Asensio much more narrow, and this makes space for Gonzalez to make the run unchallenged from the midfield. A better touch and Sorloth would have had a high quality shot. Safe to say this was Alonso's first big test in the league, and it's also safe to say that it did not go well. But I want to know what you made of the match down in the comments below. If you like this analysis and want to learn the fundamentals of tactical analysis for free, check out Tactics 12 through the link in the description below. And if you want an in-depth breakdown of Alonso's Real Madrid tactics so far this season, check out this video on screen now.